Governor Newsom recently started a new podcast that's hosting thought leaders on the conservative and liberal side. There's been strong reactions to this podcast in the media. My guest today is John Phillips, who's a KABC radio host in Los Angeles and recently started in San Francisco. He's here to tell us what are the impacts of this podcast in California and beyond, and how the politics of state might be shifting.
We're a Democrat state, we're a liberal state, but I don't think they have the lock that they think that they do on the state in perpetuity.
I'm Siamak Khorrami. Welcome to California Insider. John, it's great to have you back on. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
We want to talk to you about the politics of California. You host a radio show, you've been pretty dialed in LA, and now you're going to start in San Francisco. The governor is having a podcast. What are your thoughts on all of this?
In many ways, I think Gavin Newsom right now is the new Bud Light. Gavin Newsom is selling a product that no one wants to buy. Gavin Newsom is zigging while the Democratic Party is zagging. He looks at the landscape as it stands right now, and he sees a Democratic Party in disarray. And I think in many respects, he's right about that. But he sees a Democratic Party in disarray in a similar way to where they were in 1992, when they lost 3 presidential elections in a row, and Democrats were hungry to win back the White House. And they were willing to moderate their positions, move to the center, make themselves more appealing to middle America so they could win more votes than the Republicans and take back the White House. It worked for Bill Clinton. Being a moderate blue dog Democrat worked for him in 1992, and the party was willing to accept it and not demand ideological purity because they wanted to win so badly. What's different right now is that Democrats are angry. The base of the Democratic Party is a boiling cauldron of rage right now, and they don't want to move to the center. They don't want to move to the right. They don't want to moderate the party. What they do want to do is they want to confront Donald Trump in every possible way. You look back at what happened at that joint session of Congress when Donald Trump addressed the House and the Senate, where you had members who were kicked out, who were causing disturbances, Al Green from Texas. You had members who were wearing pink in protest. You had members who were carrying signs that were protesting what the president was saying. Some of them walked out early. They weren't pushed to the side. They weren't reprimanded by the Democratic Party. They were celebrated. They were put on all the talk shows. They received praise on social media. The loudest, most obnoxious, aggressive voices in the room were the voices that were embraced by the base of the Democratic Party. If Gavin Newsom, with this podcast, is trying to say, I'm the moderate, I'm the blue dog Democrat, I'm the conservative, I'm the future, I can win elections, I don't think they're interested in that right now. So in this weird sort of way, his lust for attention and his lust to remain relevant may ultimately end up doing him in because he is branding himself as something that Democratic voters don't want right now.
Do you think there's a difference between the Democratic Party and Democratic voters? And the Democratic Party is going further to the left, but the voters are kind of where they are. And he's trying to appeal to these voters.
I think there's a difference between being left-wing and being hyper-partisan. And right now, I think Democratic voters aren't necessarily overtly left-wing, but what they are partisan, and they all have Trump derangement syndrome right now. And so anything Donald Trump does is bad, and anything opposing Donald Trump is good. But to look at the Democratic voters and say, oh, what they want is a socialist, what they want is Bernie Sanders, what they want is AOC, I don't necessarily know if that is the answer, but what they want right now is they want a hard partisan.
So you think by Newsom doing this podcast, he's going to be more to the center and people may not like that?
Yeah. I mean, just look at who he's talking to. He booked Charlie Kirk. He booked Michael Savage. He booked Steve Bannon. He's booking all of these conservative national figures, and he's not confronting them. He's not having a food fight with them. He's bringing them on and he's having a polite conversation. He's finding areas of agreement. And he also moved to the right of where the Democratic base is, or where at least the left wing of the Democratic Party is, on a subject like biological men participating in women's sports. That was like a bomb went off when he said that. It made national news. It was something that dominated not just the news cycle here in California, but the news cycle all over the place. He was critical of Black Lives Matter. He was critical of defund the police. He was doing and saying a lot of things in that podcast to let the world know that he is not a Bernie Sanders. He is not an AOC. He is a normal, moderate person, because he thinks ultimately if he can show polls that show him beating J.D. Vance or beating whoever the Republican is, Democratic voters will say, that guy's electable. So even though we disagree with him, this is the winning horse. This is the guy we have to get behind if we want to get back in the White House. But right now, I think they're so blinded by rage, I think he's just rattling the cage. I mean, look at who criticized him. They trashed him on The View, Sonny Hostin. Jane Fonda compared him to Neville Chamberlain in an interview with Fox 11 locally here in California. And if you look at the man's social media, it's hard to find anyone praising him for doing what he's doing. They're all attacking him, and most of them are Democrats. So I don't think this is going to work out for him. I really don't.
John, there's another side to this where for a long time we haven't had civil conversation. We haven't had two leaders from different parties or different ideologies sit down and have a civil dialogue. Do you think this is going to help to see Charlie Kirk and Newsom having a civil conversation on a format for an hour and a half and not fight each other? Do you think this is going to help the nation?
I think that's certainly what he's trying for, or at least that's the image that he's trying to portray. But I don't think that's what the public's buying right now. I really don't. What evidence out there exists that shows that Democratic voters are looking for someone who is willing to bridge the divide? I mean, the closest thing they have to that right now in the Congress is John Fetterman. And John Fetterman, if you look at MSNBC or the liberal media, he is not a hero. The framing of John Fetterman is that he's a villain, is that he is someone who's not reliable, that he is a traitor to the party. I can't believe I gave that man money. I can't believe I walked precincts for that man. Look at what he's doing to us now. I just don't see an appetite out there for that right now in today's Democratic Party.
Do you think there is a chance that this Democratic Party could shift to the center? And these people are seeing the future, like John Fetterman's and Newsom's, they're trying to come to the center but the media is still there, shows like on The View and MSNBC, but they're seeing that people would shift there.
Well, we'll have a chance to test that theory out in the Democratic primary, because you're going to have candidates from all sides of the ideological spectrum within that party. And I don't think a John Fetterman could win a Democratic primary right now for president. I don't think that that's in the cards. I don't think Gavin Newsom could do it the way he's framing himself. Now, he is a chameleon who can be whatever he needs to be at any given time. I mean, don't forget, when he ran for mayor of San Francisco, he ran as the conservative candidate. He ran as the business-friendly Democrat, as the guy who wouldn't overburden you with regulations and taxation and would clean up crime and clean up homelessness, those sorts of things. And then when he ran for governor, he ran against Antonio Villaraigosa, and he ran as the left-wing candidate because the teachers union got behind him and threw their money behind Gavin Newsom. So ultimately, I don't know what his personal ideology is, but I know that politically, the way he presents himself, he is whatever he has to be at any given moment to win an election. And right now, he clearly thinks that positioning himself as the moderate Bill Clinton-style Democrat is the way to win.
In terms of California and California Democrats, do you see California being more on the left side of the Democrats, like the California Democrats? How do you assess them compared to the rest of the Democratic Party?
I think for the most part, Californians are non-political and reflexively liberal, particularly on social issues. We are a state where very few people who live here are from here. And so if you live in a small town in Iowa, you may live in a town where you go to the same elementary school that your parents went to, that your grandparents went to, that your great-grandparents went to. So for something like a school board election, that matters to you because that's not just the random school that happens to be in the place where you bought a house that you're going to sell 2 years from now and move here and move there, and you're more transient. Those people have roots in those states, and they have a very different way of looking at state and local elections than we do, where frequently people don't even know what city they live in. You talk to someone who lives in Encino, and they think Encino is its own independent municipality. And then you talk to people who live in Beverly Hills, they think that's part of Los Angeles. So people don't know much about state and local government here in California, and they're probably healthier for it. That being said, the dominant industries right now in California are primarily liberal. You look at Silicon Valley, you look at Hollywood, you look at the service industry that are dominated by unions like the SEIU. Those industries, the industries that make our economy run in California, are primarily liberal. They attract liberal employees, they are headquartered in liberal zip codes, and that's what dominates state politics because of it. Now, in the old days, when we were dominated by the aerospace industry, we were dominated by oil. At one point, the railroads just owned everything in California, Southern Pacific, and what Southern Pacific said is what ended up happening in California. And you ended up with a different electorate because those people who work in oil and railroads and defense, are more conservative. So right now we're more liberal, but I don't think we're left wing. I really don't. I don't think we're as crazy as people think that we are. I think that the Democratic Party does well here electorally because of registration and because of people being tuned out to a large degree, so they don't understand a lot of the failures that are going on right now in government, and they're reflexively liberal on cultural issues, on social issues, and that benefits the Democratic Party. But when any of those elements start to change, when the industries start moving to the right, as we're seeing right now with Silicon Valley, with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and others, that could change the politics of the state. And as certain industries die off or move, and certain industries emerge and move to California, that is going to change the political makeup of the state. So we're a Democrat state, we're a liberal state, but I don't think they have the lock that they think that they do on the state in perpetuity.
There was a recent polling done that said 48% of Californians are okay with a Republican governor. Did you see that?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the people are shifting? They want something different?
Well, the Democrats have failed. It doesn't matter what subject you talk about. It's something that is undeniable and in your face at virtually all times. If you're getting off the freeway and you see a homeless encampment where there didn't used to be one. If you're buying shampoo and you have to get the assistance of an associate because it's locked up behind bulletproof glass because of retail theft. If you get dropped from your insurance policy because the state is becoming uninsurable. Whatever the case may be, it's hard to identify something that they're doing right now. And the public understands that. And California, in the last presidential election, while we did not vote for Donald Trump, we voted for Kamala Harris, we had a very hard swing to the right. And you look at the places where that happened, it happened in places that are not regarded as being particularly competitive. Places like Pomona, places like Imperial County, down in Southern California on the Mexican border, largely Latino, largely agricultural. Places where Republicans didn't really even aggressively campaign, and they did infinitely better than they've done in previous cycles. You're seeing a lot of people who are getting fed up with the government that they're receiving and they're paying a fortune for here in California, and you're starting to see seeds of discontent popping up here and there in different parts of the state.
Some of you may be wondering, why are we talking about Shenyun on California Insider? It's a dance about China, but ancient China. I'm a big fan of Shenyun. I've been to it 14 times. Every year I go. The first time I went to Shenyun, it was so amazing. It was so uplifting. The colors, the energy, they put you into scenes of thousands of years ago. And you feel like how the ancient people lived. And you get to appreciate the history of humanity. There's a lot more to this show. It's gonna be here in Southern California, and I wanna make sure you guys go see it. You don't wanna miss this show. You have to see it at least once. And make sure to tell us what you think afterwards.
It was spectacular, so beautiful.
I thought I was going to heaven.
Oh, it was electric.
I'm getting chills talking about it.
It gets a 10 from me, that's for sure.
It was that good.
Absolutely marvelous.
Hands down the best show I've ever seen.
What do you think of the gubernatorial race? What does the scene look like to you?
Well, it's hard to tell until Kamala Harris makes a decision. She says she's going to decide sometime by the end of summer if she's running or not. It would be a huge mistake, I think, if she were to run, because she has no interest in California politics. I don't think she's been thinking about our problems and has any ideas as to how to fix them. She would be taking that job as a consolation prize because she lost the race for the presidency, and she doesn't want to go out a loser. She wants to put an impressive, big job in politics on her resume to say, see, I didn't end my career as a loser. I went back and I became governor of California. She would be checking a box. The state does not need a box checker right now. The state needs someone who will get us out of the hole we're in, get us out of the mess we're in, and do something about our insurance crisis and homeless crisis and crime crisis and budget crisis and everything else that we're dealing with. But because her name ID is so high, I mean, keep in mind, she just spent over $1 billion getting her name out there and trying to sell herself as being someone who is a competent politician. So it's going to be hard for a mere mortal to beat that, and that's who would be running against her in this race. But I think the Republicans actually, if they play their cards right and a few things break their way, have a chance. And you really need three things to win that election. You need the right message. So you need to have ideas as to what to do about all of the problems that the state's facing. You need to have the right messenger. You need to have someone who looks like they're competent, someone who is attractive to voters, someone who will not do or say embarrassing things that will take the focus off of the problems of the state. And then you need to have the money. You need to have the ability to get that message out there. And that is what Republican candidates have been lacking in recent elections. You had Brian Dahle, who ran for governor last time. He didn't have any money. John Cox said he had money. He didn't really put much up to get his message out there. I think he put $7 or $8 million. It's going to take a lot more than that. What I think needs to happen for Republicans to have the money they need to get the message and the messenger in front of enough people to win is I think Silicon Valley needs to engage at the state level the same way they're engaging right now at the federal level. So if suddenly Elon Musk and all of the cadre of tech executives that are currently involved in Washington right now, trying to reform Washington, if they focus on California and open up their checkbooks and they give a candidate who has the message and is the right messenger $50, $75, $100 million, and they get that message out there, I think that candidate could be competitive.
So if Kamala comes in, do you think that it's pretty much done for the other Democrats? We have the jungle primaries, right?
Yeah, I don't see how another Democrat beats her. And they're saying conflicting things about what they will do if she jumps in. I know Katie Porter initially said that she would get out of the race, and now she's equivocating on that. Well, we'll see what the polls say. Eleni Kounalakis, the lieutenant governor, has said similar things. Antonio Villaraigosa, the former mayor of LA, I think is the only one who says that he's in it to win it, but I don't see him having much viability. I think if she gets in, the likely scenario is that the Democratic field clears.
And how much of this is money? You have been watching these elections. How much of it has to do with money?
Well, it's not just money that would be spent in this race, in her case, it's money that was already spent. When you go out and you spend $1 billion promoting yourself and letting Democratic voters know that you have all the answers to all of their problems, it's hard to beat that. I mean, she will go into this race with almost universal name ID as someone who's already run and won statewide numerous times. And if you're a congresswoman, like Katie Porter is from Irvine, where we are right now, where she used to be the congresswoman, if you think about it, a member of Congress in California represents less than 2% of the state population. Those people are anonymous. If you're dealing with someone else like a state senator or a state assemblyman or someone who has even fewer constituents than a statewide elected or member of Congress or whatever, how are you supposed to compete with that? And the answer is you can't. So I think what you'll find is a lot of these candidates are going to change the races that they're running in, and you'll have people who are currently running for governor run for lieutenant governor or treasurer or Congress or something else.
John, you mentioned that the people in charge in California have failed as a whole, as a group. We have been sitting down with some state senators and assembly members, Democrats, Republicans, and they're all passionate. They care about the state. A lot of the people we have met, they have good credentials. They really care. They have the heart. But somehow the issues that you're mentioning, maybe they're not seeing the impact of it. And it might be the media that has not really highlighted what's happening. What are your thoughts in general about what media is doing in California?
I think technology has changed the way people look at politics. Because it used to be, going back to what we talked about before with Iowa and the school board race, those races mattered because it impacted you in a very hand-to-mouth sort of way. Your kid's school is working, your kid's school is failing, you have skin in the game, you pay attention. It's a local election that really impacts your life. It impacts your property values. It impacts your community, everything that is relevant to you. But now, because of our phones, because of the internet, because of our laptops, the world has gotten a lot smaller. And people see themselves not as Angelenos or Californians, but as people of the world. And when you see yourself as a person of the world and not as a Californian, the subjects that get you worked up are different than the subjects that would have worked you up 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So if you care about transgender athletes in sports, or you care about
abortion,
how much someone hates Donald Trump, or you care about what's going on right now in Ukraine, or whatever the subject is, and those are the issues that are most important to you, you're going to evaluate candidates who are running for office that may have nothing to do with those subjects, and that's how you're going to evaluate whether or not they're qualified, competent, and deserving. I can't tell you the number of times I get mailers for candidates in my city who are running for city council, they're running for water board, they're running for county supervisor, subjects that have nothing to do with any of those issues that I just raised, and they run on those subjects. Well, if you're running for water board based on how much you hate Donald Trump, what do you know about water? And the answer is, I don't know. If I'm a voter, how am I supposed to evaluate your competence on the subject matter that you'll have influence over? And the answer is, voters look at candidates, and if they agree with them on the subjects that they care about, they regard you as competent, and they'll reward you with a vote. So you end up with a lot of people in a lot of offices who have a lot of ideas about a lot of subjects that have nothing to do with their office. Most people in the media talked about those other subjects too, and didn't grill these people on the subject matter that would impact their offices, or the subject matter where having particular knowledge on that would allow you to stop problems before they became a crisis. We're all to blame to a certain extent, But I think more than anything, it's just voters just are interested in what they're interested in. And ultimately, that leads to very poor state and local government because many voters aren't interested in those subjects.
So essentially, the voters don't know what they're voting for.
Yeah,
And
the voters are the problem.
The qualification of the candidates. And
Yeah, and everything is a pendulum in politics. So people get lazy and they don't pay attention and they focus on subjects that have nothing to do with anything, and then suddenly you can't buy insurance because they screwed it up. And then voters say, hey, wait a minute, why did State Farm just drop me? My home just burned down and now they want to give me pennies on the dollar. And I called the insurance commissioner and they don't return my call. What do we do about this? And suddenly it becomes a crisis, and then suddenly people focus. And typically what happens is voters in California don't really buckle down and focus until there's a crisis that directly impacts them. I mean, look at what happened with George Gascon in Los Angeles County. We got to the point to where the local pharmacies are all shutting down because of retail theft. Local businesses can't buy insurance policies because they're getting robbed every other day. And suddenly voters just collectively said, enough, and they kicked him out. But it literally takes that to get people to pay attention. And we're seeing that happen more often than we used to. So maybe there will be a massive course correction that the California Democratic Party doesn't see coming. I think at some point that will happen. The date of when that will happen, I don't know, but at some point it will.
Why is it that Californians don't support the Republicans?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the industry that dominates the state, or the industries that dominate the state. We keep attracting people who are working in liberal industries who tend to, I mean, think about the demographics of who works in Silicon Valley. You're dealing with college-educated people. Many of them have graduate degrees. You're dealing with people who live in coastal communities in places like the Bay Area. You're hitting a lot of demographics that tend to be very open to voting for the Democratic Party. And you're losing people who work in oil and gas and banking. And I mean, think about all the companies that have moved out of the state and brought their employees with them. When Valero, for example, left California and moved out of state and brought their employees with them, I would imagine many of those people are Republican voters who voted for Republican candidates. Certainly social issues are something that has hurt the Republican Party over the years, abortion in particular. In the 1990s, that was a very hot subject that pro-choice voters had a very difficult time voting for pro-life candidates in California, and many of the Republican candidates were pro-life at that time, and that hurt the Republican Party. So there has been some long-term issues and some more short-term issues at play here. But again, California used to be a Republican state. I mean, you go back and you look and see how California voted in presidential elections in the past. We weren't just a Republican state, we were a reliable Republican state.
When was that?
Ronald Reagan was from here, Richard Nixon was from here. I mean, you go back to the beginning of when the state joined the Union. The state joined the Union. John C. Fremont was our first United States Senator here. He was also the first Republican nominee for president. And then that led to Abraham Lincoln. California, when California joined the Union, we were the first state to join the Union that was a free state without a corresponding slave state. California joining the Union is what made slavery illegal. We provided a majority of electoral votes in this country that was against slavery. So Abraham Lincoln was, able to win the presidential election, and there was a majority in the United States Senate from that point forward that supported eliminating slavery. It was Republicans who were doing that back then. Progressive Republicans like Hiram Johnson, people who gave us direct democracy, the initiative, the referendum, the recall. Those were all Republican ideas from Republican candidates. So it really wasn't up until the 1990s that California became a Democratic state. But up until that point, we were red or purple.
You mentioned the Silicon Valley, and there has been some other thought leaders here in California that said if the Silicon Valley turns kind of against the Democratic leadership in California because of taxation, it could actually change everything. How much do you think the Silicon Valley is now shifting towards the Republican side?
It's hard to tell at this point because Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and the Winklevoss twins and David Sachs and those people are all going to the right. And to a certain extent, even Mark Zuckerberg's playing footsie with President Trump. Jeff Bezos is playing footsie with President Trump. Those two aren't fully MAGA, but they're friendly. They're MAGA friendly, let's put it that way. There's a difference between those people at the top and the people who work in that industry. And we have a lot of evidence that shows that the people at the top are willing to play ball with Donald Trump and Republicans federally. Now, is that because they had an ideological conversion? Or is that because they're the people in charge of the government and they need to do business with them so their businesses can thrive? We know that there's movement at that level. Whether or not there's movement below them, the people who work at Twitter, the people who work at Tesla, the people who work for those companies, that remains to be seen. We haven't seen any upsets in any of those congressional races or state legislative races yet. But if the culture of that industry starts to change, you will see different voting patterns from those people who work in that industry. The political science of political socialization hasn't changed in 100 years. Your politics are determined by your friends, your family, and the people you do business with. And when one or multiple things start to change, so do your politics. And so it'll be interesting to see if over time the politics of the Silicon Valley evolve because those things start to change.
Now, do you think some people look up to Elon Musk's of the world or David Sachs, and because they shifted politically, they would start shifting inside these companies? Or do you think they are far away from the people that are working in this space?
It's too early to tell, but Elon Musk, I mean, it was all liberals essentially that bought Teslas at first. When Tesla started coming out, you'd see him on the west side of Los Angeles, you'd see him in the Bay Area. You didn't see him much in Republican parts of the state. And now that Tesla is under attack by the left, and people are trashing the cars and they're spray painting them and they're keying them, you're now seeing Republicans say, oh, I'm going to go out and buy a Tesla as a vote of confidence in Elon Musk. And I always thought that was funny, by the way, that they're attacking these cars, as if the person driving the Tesla shares Elon Musk's politics. I do business with a lot of companies where I don't necessarily share their politics. I mean, I fly American Airlines, and the only thing I have in common with them is I'm always late.
So there seems to be a shift in some high up people in the media. So the owner of LA Times, he's been shifting politically from what it seems like. And there were some other media organizations that didn't make a presidential endorsement. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the California media could be shifting?
Well, I think that you're seeing similar movement in that industry that you're seeing in the tech industry, where you're seeing the people at the top changing their politics or evolving or coming out of the closet as being conservative, but the organization hasn't changed. So if you're Patrick Soon-Shiong, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, the owner of the LA Times, and you want to moderate the newspaper and you don't want them to endorse Kamala Harris and you want the editorial page to not be as overtly left-wing, fine. Changing the culture of that paper is going to be extremely difficult because you have reporters who have worked there, some of them for a very long time. You have a newsroom that is almost entirely made up of liberals. And because the owner of the paper wants them to change the tone and change the product that they put out, that's fine. But it's going to be very difficult to turn that battleship around because they're so used to doing it a certain way and they fundamentally don't agree with the mission. Now, I think what you're going to ultimately see is a lot of personnel changes in places like the LA Times and the Washington Post. We've already seen some people from the editorial page step down and resign in protest, and others find jobs elsewhere. And so maybe it'll happen organically. There won't have to be some kind of mass layoff or mass firing. But these guys clearly have made a strategic decision that they do not want their papers to be the communication arm of the Democratic Party.
Is that going to have a big impact when a paper like LA Times, when that shift happens at the ownership level?
What's weird about the Times is their readership is declining. The number of people who subscribe to that paper has been in free fall for quite some time. But they punch above their weight because we've seen so many layoffs in so many aspects of the media that the other shops in town, the radio shops, the television shops, some of the online shops, they're reliant on the LA Times for content. My first job in radio was as a news writer for KNX. At the time, we were the CBS News radio affiliate for Los Angeles. And I can't tell you the number of days we would be in the newsroom and trying to figure out what stories we were going to cover. And the LA Times dictated what we did. The stories they covered became the stories that ended up on KNX that day. And I've worked in television, same thing happens. I worked at CNN. If the New York Times was covering something, if the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal was covering something, there's a good chance it would make the air on CNN. So even though the readership is declining, the power that they have to determine what subjects people are talking about wherever they get their news is still very, very, very strong. And they punch above their weight because of it. If the LA Times ever legitimately tries to play it straight and move to the center, they could have an impact on whether or not a candidate wins an election or loses an election. Just look at their critical coverage of LA Mayor Karen Bass following the fires. She's underwater right now in the polls, and she could very well lose her re-election bid. In the old days, the LA Times, when they were allowed to be left-wing across the board, would have likely defended her. Maybe we wouldn't even know there was no water in the fire hydrants. Maybe they would say, no, she didn't cut the fire department budget. Maybe they wouldn't even report on the claims of homeowners. It's like a pre-Elon Twitter. I mean, there are so many stories in this last election that we were aware of that would have probably been suppressed by the old guard that wasn't suppressed this time around. And did that have an impact on the election? I don't know. There are a million different factors that go into who wins and who loses, but it certainly does have an impact.
Your station is in LA. You've been
Right.
focused in LA, but now you're getting into San Francisco. In terms of the difference between LA and San Francisco and their impact on California politics, which one do you think is holding weight?
Well, I guess to keep a foot in both worlds, I'll have to have a tortilla and sourdough bread with my lunch every day. It used to be that San Francisco was the city that dominated state politics. And what happened in San Francisco really impacted what the state did, and to a certain degree impacted what the federal government did. I mean, think about it. At one point in time, both U.S. senators were from the Bay Area. Barbara Boxer, Dianne Feinstein. The governor, Gavin Newsom, former mayor of San Francisco. Governor before him, Jerry Brown, former mayor of Oakland. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, San Francisco. Fiona Ma, the treasurer, San Francisco, came from the Board of Supervisors up there. The chairman of the Democratic Party for a long time, John Burton, was a state senator and congressman from San Francisco. That one little tiny city dominated everything in California for a very long time, despite the fact that the people, the population, is primarily centered in Southern California. San Francisco is starting to lose their grip on state government. When Gavin Newsom leaves, we don't know who's going to replace him quite yet. It could be Kamala, and San Francisco could continue to have their hold on state politics, but maybe not. We now have two U.S. senators who come from Southern California, Alex Padilla, Adam Schiff. The chairman of the Democratic Party, Rusty Hicks, came from Los Angeles. So you're starting to see Los Angeles regain some of the power that they used to have that was lost to San Francisco in recent years.
And what's the difference between two? Have you seen anything noticeable between the two, the kind of politics that San Francisco plays versus Southern California?
What's weird is people regard San Francisco as being the most left-wing place on planet Earth. Yet, it seems like they have moved to the right before Los Angeles on any number of subjects. They dumped their Soros DA before LA did. They got rid of Chesa Boudin before LA got rid of George Gascon. When their school board started renaming schools because they wanted to institute woke politics at that level, they dumped their school board. They recalled them. They got rid of them. In Los Angeles, the union, UTLA, still controls the LA USD. In Oakland, Mayor Sheng Tao, who's now standing trial for federal corruption charges, she was dumped by Oakland voters. Pamela Price, the Soros DA in Alameda County, she was recalled. So they're starting to wake up. They're starting to get it even before Los Angeles. And it's funny because historically, we always regarded ourselves as the sane ones and regarded them as the nuts. And now it's kind of, we're switching places.
If Republicans could have a shot at this election, where would their support come from? Because if LA, it's gone more left, and San Francisco is kind of coming to the middle, but I doubt that San Francisco might be ready for voting Republican, but where do you think their base would come
Republican gains are going to come from Latinos and Asians. We've seen huge shifts in recent elections among the voting patterns of Asians and Latinos. For Asians in particular, particularly in areas like the Bay Area, many of them, elderly people included, have been the victims of violent crime, where they're walking around on the street and someone just clocks them for no reason, and then the DA either undercharges or doesn't charge the person at all. And they're the victims of robbery, of theft, of you name it. Many of them are being preyed upon. And collectively, they had it. And that was the driving force behind some of those recalls in the Bay Area, in Oakland and Alameda County and in San Francisco. It certainly helped Prop 36 pass statewide, which of course repealed a lot of Prop 47, which was the Soft on Crime initiative. And so the movement that we've seen at that level with Asian voters is now starting to change at congressional level, state legislative level, presidential level. And if that trend continues, that would benefit the Republican Party. We've also seen similar patterns with Latino voters. In Los Angeles County, Latinos have been the victims of a lot of crimes, small businesses in particular. The COVID shutdowns also really damaged a lot of those small businesses. It damaged their kids. Their kids couldn't go to school in person for a very long period of time because the teachers' unions did not want the schools to be open. And the memories are starting to get a little bit longer, and they're remembering how these policies damaged them and damaged their businesses and damaged their kids. And so the voting patterns of Latinos in California are starting to change. Now, not enough of them have changed yet to impact statewide elections, but if this trend continues, I think that's where the votes are for Republican candidates in California.
John Phillips, KABC radio host, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you for having me.
Let us know what you think of this interview with John Phillips. Do you think California politics are shifting? You can always email me at siamak@californiainsider.com or comment. We read all of your emails and comments. This is Siamak Khorrami with California Insider, and we'll see you next time.